The microphone hissed when he flicked it on. Then came the laugh. Sharp, dry, mocking. From the boy I helped raise. Grandson. Hey everyone. Grandpa used to write these back in the day. Thought we'd end the night with one of his classics. He held up the journal. My journal. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Walter. I'm 67 years old. And this is what really happened. The banquet hall lights bounced off glass frames and retirement plaques. My name, Walter Wells, was etched in gold across the black velvet-covered podium. Retirement. 42 years at the firm. Same department. Same building. Same grind. I thought I'd be remembered for the work, the loyalty, the unshakable steadiness. But that night, I was remembered for a joke I never meant anyone else to hear. He stood behind me while the applause faded. Eli, my grandson, 19. Bright, restless. The kind of kid who reads fast and listens slow. He wore my old cufflinks that night. Said it was a tribute. I should have known better. He tapped the mic. Grandson. We've laughed, we've cried, we've stuffed our faces. But what better way to honor Grandpa than with his own words? He cracked open the leather-bound notebook, a gift I kept by my side for years, a place for old jokes, half-formed memories, dreams that never quite grew legs. No one ever read it, not even Margaret, my wife, but Eli had. Somehow, I didn't have time to stop him. He cleared his throat, then performed it like a stand-up act. One of my old entries, probably from the early 90s, rough, irreverent, a bit crude. It was meant for me. But they laughed anyway. Not with me. At me. I stood there frozen, holding the commemorative plaque in both hands like a shield, watching decades of dignity unravel under chandelier light. Margaret touched my arm. Margaret. Walter, do something. But what? Storm the stage. Yell at a boy who didn't know what he'd just destroyed. I watched his friends film on their phones. K-workers whispering. Chuckles turning to side eyes. Even Tom, my boss, just smirked into his drink. I kept hearing the line he read, over and over, the one about leaking ambition like a flat tire at a funeral. Not even my best, just cruel in the wrong context. The applause that followed was shallow. Forced. Grandson. Anyway, happy retirement, Grandpa. He stepped back, smiling like he'd handed me a cake, not a coffin. I nodded, took the mic with hands that didn't feel like mine. My voice didn't shake. Me. Thank you. All of you. And Eli, you always knew how to surprise me. I meant every word, but not the way they thought. That night, I left the banquet early. Before the cake, before the speeches I'd written on index cards and never got to read. In the coat room, Eli found me. Grandson. Did I mess up? You looked kind of. Did you read the whole journal? He blinked. Grandson. Just the funny parts. Me, right? He handed it back. Lightly. Like it wasn't full of things I'd buried. I didn't take it. Instead, I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and pressed send on a draft email I'd kept for 3 weeks. The journal was just one piece. There were other things Eli didn't know I kept. Audio, photos, notes from meetings, observations, not just from work, from home. I walked out into the night. Cold wind, streetlights flickering above the empty sidewalk, the weight of silence around me heavier than applause. But I didn't feel old. I felt ready. The next morning I was up by 5:30. Not out of habit. Not from age. From focus. I brewed my coffee black. No sugar. Just the way I used to when we had a morning shift rotation back in '92. The kitchen was still silent, but for the low hum of the refrigerator and the drip of the coffee pot. Margaret came in half an hour later. She didn't ask if I'd slept. She knew the answer. Margaret. You okay? Me? Never been clearer. She nodded once, set her teacup down on the table like she was afraid it would shatter. Margaret. They didn't mean harm. Kids don't think. Me. No. They don't. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. On the table in front of me was the same leather journal Ally had waved around last night. It wasn't closed. I'd spent most of the night flipping through pages, remembering the man I'd been when I wrote those words. Half jokes. Sharp observations. Frustrations from boardrooms and break rooms. Lines that never made it into speeches. Some were harmless. Others were raw. But there was something else. Something Eli hadn't read. Buried in the middle. Page 88. It was an account. Not of a joke, but of a meeting. April 3rd. That was the day I caught Harold, the CFO, cooking the numbers on our third quarter bonus projections. And not just for one department. He was funneling incentives meant for junior analysts into a side consultancy he'd set up, one he later claimed didn't exist. I wrote it all down. Dates, figures, even the name of the shell company. I was supposed to report him. But Tom, my direct boss, pulled me into a conference room the next day. Told me flat out, "Tom, we all have our skeletons, Walter. You go public and they'll say you were in on it." He leaned back. "Tom, or you keep quiet, stay loyal, and you'll never have to worry about retirement." I kept quiet for 27 more years. And now, Tom was still on the board. Still sitting on a padded pension package built on years of silence. Still watching from the sidelines as my grandson turned me into a punchline. But Harold's company. I checked that morning. The shell had changed names twice, gone dormant for a decade, and then 2 years ago reactivated. Guess who its new majority shareholder was? Eli. Margaret didn't say a word when I closed the journal. Didn't ask what I planned to do. She just said quietly, "Margaret, be careful." I always had been. But this time I wasn't going to be quiet. I spent the next 2 days building a timeline. Not just of Harold's old embezzlement scheme, but of Eli's new startup, the one he bragged about on LinkedIn, the one where half the board members were names I recognized from old company holiday cards. It wasn't just nepotism. It was legacy laundering, using old money, buried favors, and false narratives to prop up a fresh face. They thought the past was dead. They forgot I wrote everything down. By the end of the week, I had a single PDF file, one document, labeled for the board confidential. I emailed it from an anonymous address, sent one copy to every sitting executive, one to the internal audit department, and one to a freelance journalist I knew from my early days in the firm. He owed me a favor. The fallout didn't come right away. But it came. 2 weeks after the party, I received a text from Tom. "Tom, we need to talk, please." I didn't respond. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Eli. "Grandson, can we meet?" I messed up. "Please." I didn't delete it, but I didn't answer either. Instead, I went for a walk. The park near our house was quiet that time of day. Just a few joggers. A man walking a golden retriever. Ducks on the pond, gliding like nothing had ever changed. I sat on the same bench I'd used when Eli was a toddler. Back when I taught him how to skip rocks. Back when he thought I hung the moon. Funny how fast time strips people down to their true shape. I pulled a folded newspaper from my coat pocket. Front page, former CFO under investigation amid allegations of decades-old fraud scheme. The article didn't name me. Didn't need to. The paper quoted anonymous documentation from a retired firm veteran. That was enough. The best part? They didn't print the whole story. Just enough to start a fire. Let the rest burn on its own. By the weekend, Eli's startup had scrubbed their social pages. Tom voluntarily stepped back from the board. And Harold, he'd gone quiet. No statement, no denial, just silence. Just like Eli. The following Monday, I went back to the office. Not as an employee, not even as a guest. Just as a man with keys that still worked. They hadn't changed the locks yet. And technically I was still within the 2-week post-retirement access window. The kind of bureaucratic oversight they never worried about because no one had ever used it. I walked past the receptionist, nodded politely, and headed straight for the 11th floor. Same floors, same fluorescent lights, same scratch on the glass of the conference room door, a scar from a whiteboard stand that tipped over during a heated merger debate in '06. Some ghosts don't fade. I didn't stop to greet anyone. Didn't look around to see who might be watching. Instead, I walked into the HR file room. The one they still hadn't digitized completely, despite all their talk about streamlining operations. I opened a cabinet, drawer FAK, pulled the file labeled Wells Walter, my own file. 42 years, summed up in manila folders. There was the letter I wrote in 1987, requesting unpaid leave when Margaret's sister fell ill. The commendation I got in 1993 for redesigning the onboarding structure, copies of my W-T's, even a faded photo from the '99 holiday party where Eli sat on my shoulders grinning under the mistletoe. But that wasn't why I was there. Behind my file, wedged where no one would look, was another one. Labeled simply Red Files 1998 Discrepancies. I had hidden it myself. Back then they had asked me to destroy it. I hadn't. Inside were memos. Email printouts. A paper trail from Harold's assistant. Even a photocopy of a ledger page with numbers circled in red. The original had been shredded, of course. I watched them do it, but not before I copied it. I placed the folder in a fresh envelope. Then I sealed it and wrote one word across the front in black marker. Eli. I left it on the desk of the chief compliance officer. No explanation. Just his name. And a past he had no idea he'd inherited. By the time I got back to the parking garage, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. Eli's voice, cracking through static. Grandson voicemail. Grandpa? I didn't know. I swear. I didn't mean to. I thought it was funny. I didn't know what was in that notebook. I didn't know what you did for us. Please. Just call me. I played it twice. Then I hit delete. That night, Margaret found me in the garage, standing by my old workbench. I was holding a shoebox. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years. A tie pin from my first promotion. A company mug with the logo faded. A card Eli had made when he was 6 that said, "Best grandpa ever." Margaret, you going to burn it all? Me. No. I closed the lid. Me. Not everything needs to burn. She didn't say anything, just stood with me in the soft glow of the garage light, the dust catching in the beam like tiny ghosts. There was a knock on the front door the next morning. I knew who it was before I opened it. Eli stood there in a hoodie. No cameras, no script, just a young man who had finally seen the part of the past no one warned him about. He held something in his hands. My journal, the same one. Grandson. I read the whole thing this time. I let the silence hang between us. He didn't flinch. Grandson. There's stuff in there, stuff I can't take back. Stuff I never should have laughed at. No. You shouldn't have. He nodded. Me. But that's not why I'm disappointed. He looked up. Me. I'm disappointed because you inherited my silence. Not my spine. That landed. He looked down, like the weight of it finally found his shoulders. Grandson. I want to fix it. I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty. Out of the bitter irony that he thought this could be fixed. Me. It's not about fixing, it's about facing it. He nodded again, then offered the journal to me. I didn't take it. Me. Keep it. Read it again. Read the parts that aren't funny. He stood there another second, then turned and left. I watched him go, his silhouette shrinking down the driveway until it was just another shadow under the trees. Back inside, I poured myself a drink, one of the good ones, a bottle I'd been saving for someday. I figured that day had finally come. I raised my glass to the window. Not to toast, just to catch the reflection of a man who'd finally told the truth, not to be heard but to be done with it. A few days later, the firm issued a statement. Buried 3 paragraphs down in small typeface in corporate lingo was a phrase that made my jaw tighten. After a thorough internal review, we've decided to part ways with several longtime board members due to past procedural irregularities that no longer align with our organizational values. Procedural irregularities. That's what they called it. Not betrayal. Not theft. Just irregularities. But it didn't matter. They were out. Quiet exits. Sudden retirements. One resignation due to health reasons. Tom was gone. Harold was being audited. And Eli's startup? The media attention had frozen his funding pipeline. Investors pulled out. His board scattered like dry leaves in wind. I didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. I mowed the lawn. Washed the car. Life kept its rhythm. And I let it. Until one morning I received a letter. A real letter. Handwritten. No return address. The envelope smelled faintly of cigars and old paper. The kind of scent you never forget if you've ever worked in a real office before. They all started smelling like cold brew and printer toner. I opened it. The handwriting was familiar. Sharp. All caps. Walter. I know I should have listened. You were right. In '98, and again this year, I thought I was building something new. I didn't realize I was just dressing up the same old bones. I'll be stepping away. If there's anything left of me after this, I hope it's something I earned. Eli. There was no apology, but it was honest. And somehow, that mattered more. That afternoon I found myself back at the old park. Same bench, same pond. The ducks were gone for the season. The trees had begun shedding. It smelled like wet bark and distant rain. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small folded square of paper. It was the original punchline Eli had read at the retirement party. I'd scribbled it on a napkin once. Rewritten it. tinkered with the rhythm. It wasn't even mine. Not entirely. Just something I heard from an old war buddy and rephrased. Funny how that one line of all things had been the match. I watched it for a long while. Then I tore it in half. Let the pieces flutter into the trash bin beside the bench. Not for drama, for peace. Because I finally understood something. What I built over 42 years wasn't perfect. I wasn't perfect. But I'd kept a record. I'd stayed silent when I thought it protected people. I'd endured hoping endurance would be enough. But silence breeds rot. And journals, as private as they may feel, are never just pages. They're loaded guns, time bombs, testaments, and sometimes they're the only thing standing between legacy and lie. I stood up, walked home, didn't look back. Winter came faster than I expected. The air sharpened. The sun got lazy. I started wearing my old wool coat again. The one with the frayed collar Margaret kept threatening to patch but never did. Said it gave me character. By Christmas the house was quieter than usual. No parties. No family dinners. Just a few phone cows, a wreath on the door and the occasional drop-in from neighbors who still remembered the man I'd been before the scandal, before the silence broke. And then one evening, just after sunset, the doorbell rang. Margaret and I looked at each other. She stayed seated. I stood up. The porch light flickered as I opened the door. Eli was standing there again. No hoodie this time. No smile. Just a wrapped box in his hands. Small. About the size of a paperback. Me. You planning to read me something else tonight? Eli quiet. No. This time, I listened. He held the box out. I didn't take it right away. Me? You don't owe me gifts? Eli. It's not a gift. It's acknowledgement. That word sat heavy in the cold air. I took the box. Stepped aside. He walked in like someone entering a church. Not because he was afraid, but because he understood it wasn't his place anymore. Margaret offered tea. He nodded. We sat at the kitchen table, the three of us. No one said much. The box sat unopened beside my cup. I waited. Eli, the board will never say it publicly, but your file, the one with the memos and numbers, it forced a total sweep. They're restructuring the audit process, new bylaws, real oversight. He looked down at his hands. Eli, I saw what we inherited. All of it, and I saw what you held back for decades. I didn't answer. Just watched him. Eli, you could have destroyed me. Me? No. I shook my head slowly. Me. I could have taught you. His eyes met mine. For the first time in months, he didn't look like a boy trying to impress a room. He looked like a man who'd finally seen what rooms can do to people. I reached for the box, unwrapped it. Inside was a leather-bound journal. Not mine. New. The pages were blank. Except the first one. Written in his hand. Day 1. I'm not starting from scratch. I'm starting with what he gave me. I closed the cover. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Eli stood up, pulled on his coat. At the door he turned. Eli, I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I just want you to see what I'll do now. I nodded once. You've got time. He left. The door clicked shut. The wind picked up outside. Margaret poured more tea. Margaret, you think he meant it? I shrugged. Me, I think he'll try. That's more than most do. Later that night I sat by the window with the new journal in my lap. Blank pages waiting. But I didn't write in it. Not yet. Instead I reached for my old one. The one he'd borrowed. Weaponized. Then returned. I flipped to the final page. It was empty. No conclusion. No final thoughts. No dramatic exit line. And I realized I didn't need to finish it. Some stories don't need an ending. They just need a reckoning. And mine had already arrived. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.